The crystal champagne flute felt cold in Amelia's hand, a stark contrast to the simmering rage beneath her Chanel tweed jacket. Tonight, the charade ended. For months, Julian, her husband, the titan of Beaumont Court, had been a ghost in their gilded cage, his excuses as flimsy as the silk negligee she'd found tucked in his briefcase, a shade she never wore. Now, following him to the opulent Michelin-starred Le Crin restaurant, her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat a countdown. He thought he was securing a new deal. He was. Just not the one he expected. Amelia Beaumont smoothed the non-existent creases on her bespoke maternity dress, the soft cashmere a gentle caress against her burgeoning 7-month belly. From the outside, her life was an enviable tapestry of luxury and privilege. Their penthouse apartment, with its panoramic views of the city skyline, was a testament to her husband Julian's relentless ambition and success. He was the charismatic CEO of Beaumont Corp, a sprawling real estate and tech empire he'd inherited and aggressively expanded. She was the elegant, supportive wife, the soon-to-be mother of his heir. Or, so the society pages and their curated Instagram feeds proclaimed. The reality, however, had begun to fray at the edges, the silken threads of their perfect marriage unraveling one by one. Julian, once doting and attentive, had become increasingly distant. His late nights at the office stretched into the early hours of the morning, his explanations vague and tinged with an unfamiliar impatience. The scent of Oud Ispahan, a Dior perfume she'd never owned, clung to his shirts with a stubborn persistence, a fragrant spectre of betrayal. Amelia wasn't naive. She'd seen the way other women looked at Julian, the predatory gleam in their eyes, the calculated smiles. He was handsome, powerful, and exuded an aura of confidence that could be intoxicating. But she had believed their bond, forged over a decade, was stronger than fleeting temptations. Their baby, a boy they'd already named Ethan, was supposed to be their new beginning, a cementing of their family. Instead, his impending arrival seemed to be pushing Julian further away. The whispers started subtly. A hushed phone call Julian took on the terrace, his voice low and intimate in a way it hadn't been with her for months. An expensive, unfamiliar jeweler's receipt for a client gift he'd brushed off, though Beaumont Corp wasn't known for its extravagant client gifting of diamond necklaces. Then there were the text messages that would flash on his phone screen, quickly flipped over always from an unsaved number. Each incident was a small shard of ice piercing Amelia's heart, the cold dread spreading through her veins. She remembered the early days, their whirlwind romance. Julian had pursued her with a single-minded intensity, showering her with affection and painting a future so bright it was blinding. He'd been her rock, especially after her parents passed away, leaving her with a comfortable inheritance but a gaping void of loneliness. Julian had filled that void, or so she'd thought. Now she wondered if he'd merely papered over it with gold leaf. The final undeniable proof came not from a private investigator, though she'd been tempted, but from Julian's own carelessness. Last week, while searching for some company documents he'd asked her to find in his home office, she'd stumbled upon a hidden compartment in his antique mahogany desk. Inside, nestled amongst old stock certificates, was a small velvet-lined box. It didn't contain a Beaumont Core share. It held a stunning, pear-shaped diamond engagement ring, far too ostentatious for her own classic tastes, and definitely not a replacement for the one already on her finger. Beside it, a handwritten note. To my dearest S, for our forever. J. S. Sophia. The name slithered into her mind, dredged from the depths of a society blog comment she'd dismissed weeks ago. A rumor about Julian being seen with a Sophia Rossi, a rising starlet with a reputation for charming wealthy benefactors. Amelia's blood had run cold. The ring wasn't for a client. It was for her, his mistress. The pain was a physical blow, stealing her breath, leaving her trembling. For days she'd walked around in a daze, the knowledge a toxic secret, poisoning her every thought. Ethan kicked within her a reminder of the life she carried, the life Julian was so callously disregarding. It was that kick, that fierce, innocent life, that finally hardened her resolve. She wouldn't crumble. She wouldn't be the scorned wife fading into obscurity. She would fight not just for herself, but for her son. She'd made an appointment, a quiet visit to a discreet clinic. The results of the prenatal paternity test now lay in her Hermès Birkin bag, nestled beside her phone and wallet, a ticking time bomb. The paper felt heavy, laden with the weight of truth and betrayal. Tonight was Julian's important business dinner with potential Japanese investors. He'd been meticulous in his preparations, choosing his most expensive Brioni suit, a new silk tie. He'd even feigned regret at leaving her alone, a quick peck on her cheek that felt more like a brush-off than a kiss. "Don't wait up, darling. This could go late. It's crucial for the new Tokyo Tower project." Amelia had smiled, a serene, almost beatific expression that masked the storm raging within her. "Of course, Julian. Close that deal." She'd waited an hour after he left her composure, a carefully constructed dam holding back a torrent of emotions. Then she'd slipped out of their penthouse, not in the chauffeured Bentley Julian insisted she use, but in a discreet taxi. She'd instructed the driver to take her to L'Écran, one of the city's most exclusive and romantic dining establishments, renowned for its intimate ambiance and eye-wateringly expensive tasting menus. A place Julian had taken her on their 5th wedding anniversary, a place where he'd sworn eternal love. The irony was a bitter pill. As the taxi pulled up a discreet distance from the restaurant's grand flower-adorned entrance, Amelia's heart hammered. Valets in crisp uniforms were busy attending to a stream of luxury vehicles. She saw Julian's custom black Rolls-Royce Phantom parked near the entrance. He was here, with S. Taking a deep breath, she paid the driver her hand, surprisingly steady, as she retrieved her bag. The cool night air did little to quell the fire in her veins. Each step towards the restaurant was a step towards the unknown, towards a confrontation that would irrevocably alter the course of their lives. The doorman, recognizing her as Mrs. Beaumont, greeted her with a polite, "Good evening, Madame Beaumont. Mr. Beaumont is already here. May I show you to his table?" Amelia offered a tight, enigmatic smile. "No, thank you, Jean-Pierre. I know where he is. I'm here to make a delivery." She swept past him, her eyes scanning the dimly lit, opulent dining room. L'Écran was designed for intimacy with secluded booths and strategically placed floral arrangements offering privacy. And there, in the most secluded alcove, the one overlooking the private Japanese garden, sat Julian. He was leaning forward, his expression animated, charming. Opposite him, bathed in the soft glow of the candlelight, sat a woman. Young, beautiful, with cascading dark hair and a crimson dress that hugged her slender figure. Sophia Rossi. Amelia watched unseen for a few moments that stretched into an eternity. She saw Julian reach across the table, his hand covering Sophia's. She saw him speak, his lips moving with an earnestness that made Amelia's stomach churn. Then the moment she had both dreaded and perversely anticipated, Julian slid off his seat, went down on one knee, and produced the very same pear-shaped diamond ring from his pocket. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The murmur of conversations, the clinking of glasses, the soft strains of a string quartet. It all faded into a dull roar in Amelia's ears. This was it. The ultimate betrayal played out in the very sanctuary of their past happiness. Her composure, so carefully maintained, threatened to shatter. But then she felt Ethan kick again, a tiny, insistent reminder. Not here, not yet. With a renewed, icy resolve, Amelia smoothed down her dress, clutched her Birkin, and began her slow, deliberate walk towards their table. Each footstep on the plush carpet was silent, yet to Amelia they sounded like thunderclaps, heralding the storm she was about to unleash. The journey across the L'Écran dining room felt like traversing a battlefield, each table of oblivious diners, a silent witness to her impending detonation. Amelia's focus narrowed, zeroing in on Julian and Sophia, their tableau of romantic bliss. A grotesque parody. Julian was still on one knee, his face alight with a triumphant smile, the diamond ring held aloft like a hard-won trophy. Sophia, her hand theatrically clasped over her mouth, eyes wide with feigned or perhaps genuine, Amelia couldn't tell surprise, was nodding a tear, tracing a glittering path down her cheek. Amelia reached their alcove just as Julian was about to slip the ring onto Sophia's finger. "Julian," she said, her voice surprisingly calm, yet carrying an edge that cut through the intimate atmosphere. It wasn't loud, but it had the force of a physical impact. Julian froze his head, snapping up. The smile on his face dissolved, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. His complexion paling to a sickly grey. His eyes, wide and panicked, darted from Amelia to Sophia, then back to Amelia as if he couldn't comprehend her presence. He looked like a child caught with his hand not just in the cookie jar, but attempting to steal the entire bakery. Sophia, startled, pulled her hand back from Julian's grasp. Her initial surprise morphed into confusion, then annoyance, as she registered Amelia's heavily pregnant form, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrowed. "Julian, who is this?" she asked, her voice a little too shrill, betraying a hint of insecurity beneath the glamorous facade. The surrounding tables, sensing the shift in emotional temperature, began to fall silent. The clinking of cutlery ceased. Conversations died down. All eyes were slowly, discreetly turning towards the unfolding drama in the corner alcove. Jean-Pierre, the maitre d', hovered anxiously near a service station, his professional poise clearly rattled. Amelia ignored Sophia. Her gaze was locked on Julian, pinning him like an insect under a microscope. "Having a crucial business dinner, darling?" she inquired, her tone laced with a saccharine sweetness that was far more terrifying than any shout. "Forging new partnerships for Beaumont Corp, are we? Or just merging assets?" Julian scrambled to his feet, knocking his chair slightly. "Amelia, what are you doing here?" He stammered, his usual articulate boardroom presence completely deserting him. He shot a desperate glance around the restaurant, acutely aware of the unwanted attention they were drawing. "This isn't what it looks like." Amelia let out a short, mirthless laugh. "Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like, Julian. You on bended knee proposing to your mistress with a ring I presume wasn't purchased with your corporate expense account." She paused, letting her words hang in the air, heavy and damning. "Though with your track record I wouldn't be surprised." Sophia, finally grasping the full horrifying picture, gasped. Her face moments before, alight with joy, was now a mixture of indignation and dawning humiliation. "Mistress Julian, what is she talking about? You told me you were divorced, that your marriage was over years ago." Her voice rose, attracting even more attention. "Quiet, Sophia." Julian hissed, his eyes flashing with anger, though fear still dominated his expression. He turned back to Amelia, attempting a placating tone. "Amelia, please. Let's not do this here. Let's go home and talk about this." "Home?" Amelia echoed, her voice dripping with disdain. "You mean the home you share with me? The home where our son's nursery is waiting? Or perhaps you have another home I'm not aware of?" She took a deliberate step closer, her presence commanding the small space. "We have nothing to talk about, Julian. Not anymore. I think your actions tonight have spoken volumes." She reached into her Birkin bag. The silence in the restaurant was now absolute, a thick, suffocating blanket. Julian watched her hand. His eyes filled with a new kind of dread. What else did she know? What was she about to do, instead of a weapon or divorce papers? As he might have half expected, Amelia pulled out a crisp, folded document, a simple, unassuming envelope. She held it up for a moment, letting him see it. "You see, Julian," she continued, her voice now resonating with a cold, hard clarity. "While you were busy planning your romantic evening and your new future, I was doing a little planning of my own." She looked from Julian's ashen face to Sophia's bewildered one. "He told you he was divorced. That's rich. He's been telling me he's been working late to secure our child's future." With a steady hand, Amelia reached forward and placed the envelope on the pristine white tablecloth, right between Julian's untouched glass of champagne and Sophia's half-eaten truffle risotto. The envelope landed with a soft, almost anticlimactic thud, yet it felt as loud as a gunshot in the supercharged silence. What is that?" Julian finally managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. He stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. Sophia, equally transfixed, leaned forward slightly. Amelia smiled, a chilling, triumphant arc of her lips. "That Julian, my dear, deceitful husband," she announced, her voice clear and carrying to the nearby tables, "is a prenatal paternity test result. For our baby. The one I'm carrying." She paused for maximum impact, her gaze sweeping over both of them. "It confirms with 99.999% certainty that you are the father." A collective gasp rippled through the eavesdropping diners. Sophia recoiled, as if struck, her eyes wide with horror, finally understanding the depth of the deception she too had been caught in. She wasn't the cherished fiancée. She was the other woman entangled with a married man whose wife was heavily pregnant. Her dream proposal had just become a public spectacle of her role in a sordid affair. Amelia continued, her voice unwavering. "So as you embark on this new chapter with Sophia, is it?" She glanced dismissively at the younger woman. "I thought you should both have all the relevant information. Consider it my wedding gift to you both." She didn't wait for a response. She didn't need to. The sight of Julian's utterly devastated face, the ring, now lying abandoned on the table beside the damning envelope, and Sophia's tear-streaked, horrified expression was satisfaction enough. Turning on her heel, her posture regale, despite the emotional turmoil, Amelia Beaumont walked away. She didn't look back. She could feel the weight of every stare in l'écran on her, but she didn't care. The silence held for a moment longer, then erupted into a cacophony of shocked whispers and furtive phone calls. The Beaumont scandal had just gone public in the most dramatic way imaginable. As she exited the restaurant, Jean-Pierre rushed to open the door, his face a mask of professional concern mixed with awe. "Madame Beaumont, are you all right? Can I call you a car?" Amelia paused, took a deep, steadying breath of the cool night air, the first truly clean breath she felt she'd taken in months. A faint, genuine smile touched her lips. "Thank you, Jean-Pierre. I believe I can manage. I feel remarkably well, actually." She walked towards the curb, not waiting for a valet, and raised her hand. A taxi, as if summoned by fate, immediately pulled over. As she settled into the back seat, she allowed herself a single, silent tear, not of sadness, but of release. The first battle was won. The war, she knew, was just beginning. But tonight, she had dropped the bomb, and the fallout was Julian's to navigate. The immediate aftermath in L'Écrin was chaotic. Julian Beaumont, usually so poised and in command, stood frozen. The DNA report, a scarlet letter on the pristine white tablecloth. Sophia Rossi, her face streaked with mascara, had burst into loud accusatory sobs. "You lied to me, Julian. You said she was your past. You swore." Her voice no longer the seductive purr he knew was sharp and laced with the bitter tang of betrayal. The restaurant, a sanctuary of quiet elegance, moments before, buzzed with the energy of 1,000 hushed, excited conversations. Smartphones initially raised discreetly were now more overtly capturing the scene. Julian could almost feel the flash of digital damnation. His carefully constructed world, his reputation, his impending, perfect new life, all were crumbling around him, live-streamed to the voracious appetite of city gossip. "Sophia, for God's sake, keep your voice down." Julian finally hissed his panic, giving way to a desperate attempt at damage control. He grabbed her arm, trying to pull her back into the chair. "We need to leave, now!" "Leave after this humiliation," she shrieked, pulling her arm away. "You made me a fool." The pear-shaped diamond ring lay on the table, forgotten its sparkle, now seeming garish and tainted. Jean-Pierre, flanked by 2 burly security guards, who usually dealt with overly enthusiastic paparazzi outside, not brawling patrons within, approached cautiously. "Mr. Beaumont, Ms. Rossi, perhaps it would be best if you continued this discussion elsewhere." His tone was polite but firm. L'Écrin's reputation was also at stake. Julian, red-faced and trembling with a mixture of rage and mortification, threw a wad of cash onto the table, far more than the bill could possibly be. "Keep the change," he snarled, grabbing Sophia's arm again this time, with a force that brooked no argument. He practically dragged her through the restaurant, past the gawking diners, their whispers following him like a swarm of angry bees. The ignominious exit was a stark contrast to his usual confident stride. Amelia, meanwhile, was miles away, the city lights blurring past the taxi window. The adrenaline was beginning to wear off, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness, but also a strange sense of empowerment. She had faced the monster and landed the first blow. She hadn't screamed or cried or pleaded. She had delivered the truth with a chilling precision that she knew would haunt Julian far more than any emotional outburst. Her phone buzzed. It was her lawyer, Marcus Thorne, a man known for his discretion and his ruthlessness in high-stakes divorce cases. "It's done," Amelia said, her voice calm. "Phase 1 is complete." "I'll have the papers filed first thing in the morning, Amelia," Marcus replied, his voice all business. "And I've already alerted my PR contact. We'll control this narrative, not Julian." Control, that was the key. Julian had controlled her life for too long, cloaking his manipulations in a veneer of care and affection. No more. Back at their penthouse, which now felt cold and alien, Amelia walked through the rooms, each object a reminder of a life built on lies. The photographs of them smiling, the expensive art Julian had chosen, the king-sized bed they no longer truly shared. She went straight to the nursery Ethan's room. The soft blues and greys, the carefully chosen crib, the tiny clothes folded neatly in the drawers. This was real. This was worth fighting for. The news of the Lecrin incident spread like wildfire. By morning, it was the lead story on every society blog and gossip column. Beaumont bombshell, CEO's proposal, interrupted by pregnant wife, screamed one headline. DNA drama at Lecrin. Julian Beaumont's double life exposed, declared another. Beaumont Corp's stock, always sensitive to its CEO's reputation, took an immediate, albeit small, dip in pre-market trading. Julian's phone had been ringing off the hook since he'd managed to escape the restaurant with a hysterical Sophia. His formidable mother, Eleanor Beaumont, the steely matriarch who still held considerable sway over the family and the company's board, was the first to get through his wall of ignored calls. "Julian, what in God's name have you done?" Eleanor's voice was glacial, devoid of any maternal sympathy. "Lecrin. A proposal with a pregnant wife at home. Are you trying to single-handedly dismantle everything your father and I built?" "Mother, it's complicated," Julian began, but Eleanor cut him off. "Complicated. It sounds like a common, sordid mess, Julian. A mess you created, and a mess you will fix. Or I will fix it for you, and you won't like my methods." The Beaumont name was her idol, and Julian had just spat upon it. Her primary concern wasn't her son's emotional turmoil or Amelia's pain, but the integrity of the Beaumont legacy and its financial implications. Sophia Rossi, meanwhile, was having her own meltdown. Holed up in her trendy downtown loft, a loft Amelia now suspected Julian was paying for, she was fielding calls from her agent, her former friends, and a slew of reporters. Her Cinderella story had turned into a pumpkin carriage wreck. She had genuinely believed Julian was on the verge of divorcing Amelia. He'd spun a convincing tale of a loveless marriage, a wife who was cold and emotionally distant. He'd never mentioned the pregnancy. The public humiliation was devastating. Was she a victim? In some ways, yes. She'd been lied to, manipulated. But she'd also willingly entered into a relationship with a man she knew was at the very least separated, not yet fully free. Her ambition had perhaps blinded her to the red flags. Amelia, however, was not entirely alone in her fight. An unexpected message arrived later that day. It was from a name she vaguely recognized, Chloe Dubois, a former executive assistant at Beaumont Corp, who had been unceremoniously fired a year ago. The rumor mill had churned out tales of incompetence, but Chloe had always struck Amelia as sharp and efficient during their brief interactions at company events. The message was simple. "Mrs. Beaumont, I read about what happened. I'm not surprised by Julian's behavior. There are things you might not know about him, things beyond the affairs. If you're interested in the truth, I'm willing to talk. No charge. Consider it a delayed severance package for us both." Amelia's interest was piqued, an ally, and one with insider knowledge. Chloe had worked closely with Julian, had seen the inner workings of his office, his deals, his moods. What things beyond the affairs could she be referring to? Amelia arranged to meet Chloe at a discreet cafe, far from the prying eyes of the city's elite. Chloe Dubois was a petite woman with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She'd brought a sleek, encrypted Kingston Iron Key USB drive. "Julian is more than just a cheat, Mrs. Beaumont," Chloe began, her voice low and serious. "He's reckless. He cuts corners. He makes enemies. I was fired because I stumbled upon discrepancies in the funding reports for the new Shanghai development project. Significant discrepancies. I tried to bring it to the attention of the CFO, but I was shut down. 2 days later, I was let go with a hefty NDA and a vague threat about my future employability. Chloe slid the Kingston drive across the table. I made copies before they wiped my computer. It's all there. Inflated invoices, payments to shell corporations, communications that suggest, well, more than just unethical business practices. Possibly illegal ones. Amelia stared at the USB drive. This was far bigger than she had imagined. She had set out to expose an unfaithful husband to secure her and her son's future. But if what Chloe claimed was true, Julian wasn't just a personal villain. He was potentially a corporate one, too. The DNA report had been a personal bomb. This USB drive could be an atomic one, capable of leveling the entire Beaumont empire. "Why are you giving this to me?" Amelia asked, her mind racing. Chloe's expression was grim. "Because he ruined my career, Mrs. Beaumont. And because, frankly, he's a bastard who deserves to have everything he built on lies taken away from him. You have the resources and the motivation to use this. I just want to see him get what he deserves." Amelia picked up the USB drive. It felt heavier than the DNA report. The stakes had just been raised exponentially. Her fight for personal justice was now intertwined with a potential corporate takedown. She had the weapon. Now she needed to figure out how to use it without causing an explosion that would harm her own child's legacy. The fallout from Lequin was just the beginning. A new, more dangerous front had just opened up. And Amelia, with her unlikely new ally, was preparing for a much larger war. The confirmation of the paternity test, which Amelia's lawyer, Marcus Thorne, strategically leaked to select media outlets, was in many ways old news by the time it formally circulated. Amelia's dramatic pronouncement at Lequin had already cemented Julian's status as the father in the public's mind. The real impact of the leak was more nuanced. It painted Amelia as meticulously prepared a woman who had armed herself with irrefutable facts before making her move. It subtly underscored Julian's deceit. He hadn't just cheated, he'd knowingly risked the legitimacy and security of his own child. Beaumont Corp's stock, which had taken an initial hit, wobbled precariously. Board members, already unnerved by Eleanor Beaumont's icy fury, began to hold clandestine meetings. Julian's leadership, once seen as visionary and aggressive, was now being questioned as reckless and unstable. His personal life was bleeding into his professional reputation, and the stain was proving difficult to wash away. He tried to issue a public apology, a carefully worded statement drafted by a crisis PR firm, expressing deep regret for the pain caused to his family, and assuring stakeholders that his personal matters would not affect the company's operations. Few were convinced. The apology read as hollow forced and most damningly too late. Julian himself was a man besieged. He was sleeping in a hotel, unable to face Amelia, unwilling to return to the empty penthouse. Sophia Rossi, after a few days of tearful recriminations and threats to go to the press with her tell-all story, had suddenly gone quiet. Julian had, through his lawyers, offered her a substantial sum for her silence and a swift, discreet disappearance from his life. The last thing he needed was Sophia adding more fuel to the raging fire. He wasn't sure if she'd taken the deal, but the immediate cessation of her social media tirades suggested she was at least considering it. He felt a pang of something that might have been guilt for Sophia. He had, after all, lied to her extensively. But it was quickly overshadowed by his own desperate fight for survival. Amelia, guided by Marcus Thorne, and now armed with Chloe Dubois's explosive Kingston Iron Key USB drive, began her own quiet investigation. Marcus engaged a team of forensic accountants, the best in the business, to dissect the data Chloe had provided. They worked in secrecy, their meetings held in unassuming rented office spaces, far from the Beaumont sphere of influence. Chloe wasn't exaggerating, Amelia, Marcus reported, a week later, his face grim. The Shanghai development project is a hornet's nest. We're seeing patterns of inflated billing transactions with offshore accounts that have no clear business purpose and what look like kickbacks. Julian hasn't just been careless. He's been systematically defrauding his own company, his own shareholders for years. The scale of it was breathtaking. Millions, perhaps tens of millions, siphoned off. It wasn't just about funding a lavish lifestyle with a mistress. It was about greed on an epic scale. Amelia felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. The man she had loved, the father of her child, was a common thief dressed in a Brioni suit. Her own grief was a complex, shifting landscape. There were moments of profound sadness for the life she thought she had, for the man she believed Julian to be. But these were increasingly overshadowed by a hardening anger and a steely resolve. She wasn't just fighting for a fair divorce settlement anymore. She was fighting to protect her son from being associated with a criminal, to salvage what she could from the impending wreckage. Chloe, her unlikely ally, proved invaluable. She possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of Beaumont Corp's inner workings, its key players, and, crucially, Julian's habits and vulnerabilities. Julian always had a blind spot for vanity projects, Chloe explained during one of their clandestine meetings. The Shanghai Tower was his baby. He personally oversaw every aspect, which also meant he could manipulate the financials with fewer checks and balances. He also has a penchant for using a specific offshore bank in the Cayman Islands, Trident Trust. He thinks it's impenetrable. This information was gold. The forensic accountants focused their efforts on tracing the money trail to Trident Trust. It was slow, painstaking work, like chipping away at a mountain with a teaspoon. But gradually, a clearer picture of Julian's financial deceptions began to emerge. While Amelia delved into Julian's financial treachery, the story of Sophia Rossi took an unexpected turn. She hadn't simply taken Julian's money and disappeared. Instead, she had hired her own lawyer, a famously tenacious female attorney known for representing women in high-profile scandals, and was preparing her own offensive. It turned out, Sophia wasn't just a fame-hungry starlet. Her family back in Italy had been financially ruined years ago by a ruthless property developer in a deal that bore an uncanny resemblance to some of Beaumont Corp's more aggressive tactics. Sophia had come to the city not just seeking fame, but with a hidden agenda to get close to powerful men in the real estate world, to understand their methods, perhaps even to find a way to exact some form of justice for her family. Julian, with his charm and his influential position, had been a prime target. Her affection for him might have even been genuine at some point, but it was always intertwined with this deeper hidden motive. Sophia, it seemed, had her own secrets, her own reasons for being entangled with Julian Beaumont. She hadn't known about Amelia's pregnancy, and she was genuinely furious about that deception. But her primary goal wasn't necessarily to be Mrs. Julian Beaumont. It was something far more complex. She didn't contact Amelia directly, but her lawyer began making subtle inquiries, feeling out the possibility of an alliance. Two women scorned by the same man, each with her own arsenal of damaging information. The pressure on Julian was mounting from all sides. His mother, Eleanor, was now actively working to sideline him within Beaumont Corp. She convened an emergency board meeting, proposing the appointment of an interim CEO to guide the company through this period of uncertainty. Julian, still a major shareholder, fought back, but his support on the board was eroding rapidly. His father, a man who had always been more focused on philanthropy than business in his later years, was reportedly deeply disappointed and had withdrawn his usually staunch support for his son. Then came another twist, a more personal one that Julian hadn't anticipated. During a heated argument with his mother, where she accused him of tarnishing the family name beyond repair. Eleanor let slip a piece of information Julian had never known: his perfect father. The man whose legacy Eleanor so fiercely protected had also had a significant affair, years ago, one that had nearly destroyed their own marriage and the company. Eleanor had covered it up, managed the scandal, and saved the Beaumont name, all while Julian was a child oblivious. "You're just like him." Eleanor had spat, her voice trembling with a lifetime of suppressed resentment. "Reckless, arrogant thinking with what's between your legs instead of your head. Only he was smart enough not to get caught proposing in public to his whore while his wife was pregnant." The revelation stunned Julian. His father, his idol, was flawed in the same way he was. It didn't excuse his own actions, but it added a layer of bitter irony to his situation. The Beaumont legacy, it seemed, was built on more than just bricks and mortar. It was built on secrets and expertly managed deceptions. Amelia through her own channels. Marcus Thorne had an extensive network, heard whispers of this old family secret. It didn't change her resolve, but it did make her realize that the Beaumont empire was perhaps even more rotten at its core than she had initially perceived. It wasn't just Julian. It was a generational pattern. The unraveling was happening faster than anyone could have predicted. The DNA test had been the catalyst, the public shaming the accelerant. But it was the secret's financial and personal now bubbling to the surface that threatened to bring the entire edifice crashing down. And Amelia, holding the key to Julian's biggest secret, the financial fraud, was poised to decide just how much pressure to apply. The question was no longer if Julian would fall, but how far and who he would take down with him. The forensic accountants, after weeks of relentless digging, finally struck gold. Or rather, they struck a very specific, very damning wire transfer. A multi-million-dollar payment from one of Beaumont Corp's Shanghai Project Shell corporations, routed through Trident Trust in the Cayman Islands to a private art dealer in Geneva. The reference for the payment, Acquisition Le Jardin Secret. Amelia frowned when Marcus Thorne presented this to her. A secret garden. What does that mean? Is he buying rare plants now? Not exactly, Marcus said, a grim smile playing on his lips. We did some digging. Le Jardin Secret isn't a botanical specimen. It's the unofficial title of a privately commissioned, extremely controversial and highly illegal collection of altered old master paintings. The artist, a disgraced prodigy known only as Nightingale, takes original Renaissance and Baroque masterpieces often stolen or of dubious provenance and digitally remixes them, embedding modern, often subversive imagery within them. They are then sold on the black art market for astronomical sums to a very select, very discreet clientele. It's money-laundering, art desecration, and trafficking of stolen goods, all rolled into one very ugly package. Amelia felt a wave of nausea. Julian, the suave businessman, the patron of mainstream art galleries, was involved in this. It was a level of depravity she hadn't fathomed. It wasn't just about financial fraud to enrich himself. It was about something darker, more illicit, a perversion of beauty and history for profit. The Nightingale pieces are considered digital gold, Marcus continued, untraceable if handled correctly, and their value only appreciates within that shadowy world. This isn't just about Beaumont Corp's money, Amelia. This is felony territory on an international scale. This goes far beyond the SEC. We're talking Interpol. This was the true bomb. The DNA revealed the proposal, the corporate embezzlement. Those were scandals. This was a potential criminal indictment that could send Julian to prison for a very long time. But before Amelia could fully process the implications of this art world underworld, another far more personal twist emerged, one that blindsided everyone. It came not from financial records, but from a distraught Sophia Rossi. After weeks of silence punctuated by legal posturing from her attorney, Sophia requested an urgent secret meeting with Amelia. No lawyers present, just the two of them. Amelia, wary, but also intensely curious, agreed. They met in the neutral territory of a private suite at the St. Regis Hotel, a place known for its discretion. Sophia was a changed woman. The glamorous, confident facade was gone, replaced by a raw, visible fear. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Her hands trembled as she clutched a small, worn, leather-bound journal. "Mrs. Beaumont. Amelia," she began, her voice hoarse. "I know you have every reason to hate me, and I deserve it. I was foolish, I was ambitious, and I allowed myself to believe Julian's lies." "What do you want, Sophia?" Amelia asked, her tone cool, but not entirely unkind. She saw a woman who was clearly terrified, not just humiliated. "Julian, he's not just a liar, Amelia. He's dangerous." Sophia's voice dropped to a whisper. When I told him I was pregnant a few days before your announcement at L'Écran, he wasn't happy." Amelia's blood ran cold. "You're pregnant?" This was a complication she hadn't anticipated. Another child caught in Julian's web. Sophia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes. About 8 weeks now. When I told him, he changed. He became cold, almost menacing. He told me it was inconvenient. He said I needed to take care of it, and that he would facilitate everything." Amelia felt a surge of protective maternal anger, not just for her own child, but for Sophia's too. "But that's not the worst of it," Sophia continued, her voice cracking. She opened the journal. "My family. We have a history of a rare genetic condition. It's called Fabry disease. It's carried by women, but primarily affects men. My brother died from it. My uncle too. There's a specific genetic marker. Before I got serious with Julian, when I thought we might have a future, I had him tested. Discreetly. I got a sample of his DNA from a glass he used at my apartment. I sent it to a private lab in Switzerland that specializes in rare genetic disorders using a pseudonym." Amelia listened, stunned into silence. This was beyond anything she could have imagined. Sophia's finger traced a line in her journal. The results came back just after everything exploded. Julian doesn't have the active disease, but Amelia, he's a carrier of the mutated GLA gene, the exact same rare variant that runs in my maternal line. The doctors said the chances of 2 unrelated people carrying the same rare variant of this gene are astronomically small, almost impossible unless they are related. Amelia finished, her mind reeling. Sophia nodded, her face ashen. "The lab here, after I told them about the Fabry possibility, following my positive pregnancy test, and what I knew from the Swiss lab, ran a more detailed panel on my baby's preliminary DNA obtained via NIPT. They also had Julian's sample from the paternity test you initiated. My lawyer managed to get the detailed genomic data from it, arguing for Julian's full health disclosure given the circumstances. They compared his full genetic markers, not just the ones for paternity, with mine. Amelia. Julian Beaumont. He's my half-brother. The revelation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Julian and Sophia, the lovers, were siblings sharing the same father. His father. And my mother. Sophia whispered, tears streaming down her face. My mother had an affair years ago before she met the man I called my father. With a powerful, wealthy businessman. She never told me his name. She took the secret to her grave. But it must have been Julian's father. The timelines match. The genetic markers are irrefutable. The baby I'm carrying, my God, the baby. She broke down into sobs. Amelia felt as though the floor had dropped out from beneath her. This wasn't just a messy divorce and corporate fraud. This was a Greek tragedy. Julian wasn't just an adulterer and a criminal. He was unknowingly involved in an incestuous relationship. And now Sophia was pregnant with his child, his half-nephew or niece. The original DNA test that Amelia had dropped on the table at L'Écran, confirming Julian was Ethan's father, seemed almost mundane in comparison to this horrifying new layer of genetic entanglement. This explained Julian's visceral, almost panicked reaction when Sophia told him she was pregnant, not just inconvenience, but perhaps a subconscious primal revulsion, or a dawning, terrifying suspicion if he'd known about his father's extensive affairs, or Sophia's family medical history. "Does Julian know?" Amelia asked, her voice barely audible. Sophia shook her head. "No. I only got the final confirmation this morning. I don't know what to do. He's capable of anything. Especially now if this truth came out on top of everything else." Amelia now understood Sophia's terror. Julian, cornered and facing ruin, might react violently to a revelation of this magnitude. The Beaumont name, already tarnished, would be utterly destroyed by a scandal of incest. Eleanor Beaumont would likely have a stroke. The standoff was no longer just between Amelia and Julian. It now involved Sophia, 2 unborn children, and a secret that could bring unimaginable devastation. Amelia took a deep breath. Her own plans, her desire for justice, seemed to warp and shift in the face of this monstrous new reality. The information about Le Jardin Secret and the art trafficking was a powerful weapon, certainly enough to ensure Julian faced legal consequences. But this was different. This was a family secret of such profound darkness that its exposure would create victims out of everyone, including the innocent children. "Sophia," Amelia said, her voice surprisingly gentle, "we need to be very careful, for the sake of the children, your child and mine." The dynamic had shifted entirely. Amelia was no longer just the wronged wife. She was now the keeper of a devastating secret one that made her previous grievances with Julian, however valid, part of a much larger, more tragic narrative. She still wanted justice for Julian's financial crimes and his betrayal of her. But how could she wield the weapon of his art trafficking when this even more catastrophic revelation loomed? The standoff had reached a critical, terrifying juncture. Julian Beaumont was a man on the precipice, unaware of the true abyss that lay beneath him. And Amelia, along with the terrified Sophia, held the power to either push him over the edge or somehow navigate a path through the ruins that protected the truly innocent. The choices she made in the next few days would define all their futures. The weight of Sophia's revelation settled upon Amelia like a physical burden. The intricate web of Julian's deceit had morphed into something far more grotesque, a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions, with incestuous undertones and innocent lives hanging in the balance. Her quest for justice, once a clear, burning imperative, was now clouded by an array of horrifying ethical considerations. Amelia knew one thing with chilling certainty: the information about Julian and Sophia being half-siblings could not become public fodder. The scandal would be too catastrophic, the psychological damage to Sophia, and potentially to both unborn children in the future, irreparable. It was a secret that, for the sake of basic human decency, needed to be contained, managed with extreme prejudice. But Julian's other crimes, the corporate fraud, the illicit art dealings, those were different. Those were choices he'd made, victims he'd consciously created, beyond their twisted family dynamic. For those, there had to be a reckoning. Amelia, with Marcus Thorne's counsel, devised a multi-pronged strategy. First, Sophia. Amelia surprisingly found herself feeling a degree of empathy for the younger woman, who was clearly as much a victim of circumstance and Beaumont family secrets as anyone. Amelia ensured Sophia had access to the best legal and emotional support, funded discreetly. Sophia, terrified but resolute, agreed to Amelia's plan. She would quietly relocate far from the city and Julian's reach to have her baby in peace. The truth of the child's full parentage would be a closely guarded secret, shared only with a select few, and never with Julian, unless circumstances became absolutely dire. Her own family's rare genetic condition, Fabry disease, gave her a credible tragic reason to shield her child from any public association with the Beaumonts. Next, Julian. Amelia decided against immediately leaking the Le Jardin secret information to the international authorities. Such a move, while ensuring Julian's arrest, could also trigger a chaotic implosion of Beaumont Corp, potentially harming innocent employees and diminishing the assets available for her and Ethan, and indeed for any settlement for Sophia's child. Instead, she opted for a more controlled detonation. She arranged a meeting, not with Julian, but with his mother, Eleanor Beaumont. They met at Amelia's penthouse, a clear power play. Amelia, no longer the timid, accommodating wife, was in command. Eleanor arrived, her face a mask of icy composure, though her eyes betrayed a deep weariness. She expected a discussion about divorce terms, perhaps a threat of further public shaming. She was unprepared for what Amelia laid out. Amelia calmly and methodically presented Eleanor with a summary of the forensic accountant's findings regarding the Shanghai project and the Shell corporations. She didn't mention Le Jardin secret by name, but alluded to highly illegal international transactions that would attract the attention of global law enforcement. Julian hasn't just been unfaithful, Eleanor, Amelia stated, her voice firm. He's been systematically defrauding Beaumont Corp for years. He has exposed the company to catastrophic legal and financial risks. I have irrefutable proof. Eleanor's composure finally cracked. The Beaumont name, her life's work, was threatened not just by scandal, but by utter ruin. "What do you want, Amelia?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "I want Julian removed from Beaumont Corp. Permanently," Amelia replied. "I want him to have no control, no influence, no access to its funds ever again. I want a divorce settlement that reflects the true scale of his deceit and ensures my son's financial security, and indeed that of his other child, though Julian will never know the full story of that connection from me." Amelia paused, letting the implication hang. "And I want him to face consequences for his actions, but in a way that minimizes damage to the company that bears my son's name." She then played her trump card, though Eleanor would never know its true horrifying nature. There are other secrets, Eleanor. Secrets about Julian, about your family, far darker than financial crimes. Secrets that, if revealed, would not just destroy Julian, but would obliterate the Beaumont legacy entirely, leaving nothing but ash. I have no desire to unleash that kind of devastation, primarily for the sake of the children. But my restraint is conditional on your full cooperation in removing Julian and cauterizing the damage he has caused. Eleanor Beaumont, a woman who had weathered countless storms, stared at Amelia, seeing not her son's estranged wife, but a formidable adversary who held all the cards. She didn't ask what those darker secrets were. The chilling conviction in Amelia's eyes was enough. She knew Amelia wasn't bluffing. The fear of the unknown was a powerful motivator. The deal was struck. Eleanor, using her significant influence with the board and her knowledge of Julian's vulnerabilities, orchestrated his complete removal from Beaumont Corp. He was forced to resign from all positions, his shares placed in a blind trust managed by an independent third party, with significant portions allocated to Amelia, and a separate discreet trust for Sophia's child, framed as a compassionate gesture from the family to a woman Julian had wronged. Julian fought, of course, with the fury of a cornered animal. He threatened, he raged, he even tried to appeal to Amelia's past affection. But it was too late. His mother, armed with the threat of Amelia's unspecified, darker secrets and the concrete evidence of financial malfeasance, was relentless. Julian Beaumont, the titan of industry, was cast out. He avoided immediate criminal prosecution for the art trafficking, as Amelia held that information back, using it as leverage to ensure his complete compliance and silence. However, the evidence of his corporate fraud was anonymously leaked to the Securities and Exchange Commission by Marcus Thorne. The ensuing investigation, while carefully managed to avoid collapsing, the entire company resulted in hefty fines for Beaumont Corp, now under new interim leadership, and a deferred prosecution agreement for Julian contingent on him paying substantial restitution and staying out of any corporate leadership roles for life. He was publicly disgraced, his reputation in tatters. He lost his empire, his wife, his mistresses, and his standing in society. He was left a wealthy but broken man, haunted by the wreckage of his life, never knowing the full, terrifying truth of his connection to Sophia, or the bullet he dodged regarding Le Jardin Secret. Amelia, meanwhile, finalized her divorce. She received a very substantial settlement, not out of greed, but to secure Ethan's future and to potentially fund her own ventures. She sold the opulent penthouse, a place tainted by too many lies, and bought a beautiful, light-filled home in a quieter, more family-oriented neighborhood. She gave birth to Ethan James Beaumont, a healthy, beautiful boy. Holding him in her arms, she knew every painful step, every difficult decision had been worth it. She was free, she was strong, and she was a mother. Sophia Rossi also gave birth to a healthy child, a little girl she named Grace, in a quiet coastal town in California. She started a new life, focusing on her daughter and using the funds from the discreet trust to build a stable future far from the shadows of the Beaumonts. She and Amelia maintained a quiet, respectful contact, bound by their shared experience and the secrets they held. The Fabry disease gene thankfully had not been passed to Grace in its active form, though Sophia knew vigilance would be required. Amelia didn't just retreat into motherhood. With Chloe Dubois by her side, now a trusted friend and business partner, she began to explore new opportunities. Using her settlement and her sharp intellect, she invested in ethical startups, companies focused on sustainability and social responsibility. She found a new purpose, building something clean and positive, a legacy for Ethan that was untainted by the sins of his father. Beaumont Corps, under new leadership and chastened by the scandal, underwent a significant restructuring. Eleanor Beaumont retired, leaving the company to professionals who valued transparency and ethics, or at least appeared to. The brand survived, but it was forever changed, a reminder of the fragility of power and the corrosive nature of secrets. Amelia Beaumont had walked into L'Écrin a betrayed wife. She emerged a warrior, a protector, and ultimately a survivor. She had faced the darkness, both Julian's and the unexpected shadows of his family's past, and had chosen a path that, while fraught with complexity, prioritized the innocent and sought a controlled, meaningful justice rather than chaotic revenge. Her new beginning was not just about personal healing, but about rewriting her own narrative and that of her son on terms defined by strength, integrity, and a hard-won wisdom. The gilded cage was no more. In its place stood a future built on truth. And there you have it, a story of betrayal, resilience, and the shocking secrets that can lurk beneath the most glamorous surfaces. Amelia's journey from a heartbroken wife to a formidable force shows that even in the face of devastating deceit, strength and truth can pave the way for a new beginning. The twists and turns from the DNA bombshell at L'Écrin to the unfathomable family secrets remind us that reality can indeed be stranger and far more dramatic than fiction. What did you think of Amelia's choices? Could Julian ever truly find redemption? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were gripped by this millionaire drama and want more stories filled with intrigue and unexpected twists, don't forget to hit that like button. Share this video with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next shocking tale. Your support helps us create more content just like this.